everything. You see much higher value taking place. And then you get to this point of this father who has 2 sons. What would a father not give for his son? It's a great value that you see happening here in this third parable as it crescendos into this. The prodigal son then also is the truest picture of God rejoicing over a repentant sinner. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later. But the sheep doesn't intentionally run away, just accidentally sort of stupidly falls away and is lost. The coin is not lost on its own. Actually, the woman takes credit for losing the coin here. The son willfully rejects his father. Let's get into the third parable here. Verse 11. And he said, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. So he divided his wealth in between them. This was the ultimate insult to his dad. In the culture of that day, both the Jewish culture and the Roman culture, the father would pass on inheritance to his sons. The first son would get twice as much. So the older brother would get 2/3 of the inheritance. The younger brother would get 1/3. But this was done when the father died. What this young man, when he comes to his father and says, Father, give me my inheritance, he says, Father, I wish you were dead. I could care less about you. I want benefits for myself. Give me the money. I don't need you. Slapping his father in the face. Notice, the sheep wanders away. The coin falls away. The son runs away. Despising his father, turning against him. Oh, the hurt that his father must have felt. And yet you see him, he gives in to his son's request. He divides his wealth between them. Then verse 13, not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country. And there he squandered his estate with loose living. He gives up his father's household and everything for loose living. He gets one whole verse to describe his life. What must have seemed like life and joy to him at the time, having freedom and fun and the benefits of this and having money to spend on all these things, being able to partake in all that, is summarized in one verse. Squander, loose living. Everything he has, all that joy he was looking forward to and pursuing and abandoning his father, summarized in those 2 words. Verse 14, now when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. He spent his money on these things, and all of a sudden, this famine now comes. People are already tighter on their money. He doesn't have even any money to spend, so he's not able to mooch off of people like he was originally. And then verse 15, so he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country. And he sent him into the fields to feed swine. That word hired out there is literally the idea of cementing or gluing oneself to. It's a famine. No one has lots of money. No one has lots of food. You see him sitting here, and he is literally grabbing onto people. Would you please take me in? I just need some food. Please help me. Him gluing himself, cementing himself to these people until finally this one guy says, fine, stop bothering me. Go feed the pigs. Which in any culture was a very low, humbling thing. And to the Jewish culture who Jesus is speaking to, would have been unthinkable. These are unclean animals. They're not supposed to have anything to do with them. And here he is having to walk with them, care for them, feed them, be with them. This would have been detestable. And yet he does. He's so hungry. It actually says then, though he's feeding these pigs, verse 16, he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving anything to him. He's gotten this job from this guy, but this guy doesn't even let him eat the food that he's feeding the pigs. The word there is pods. It actually means little horns. They're from the carob tree. What you do is you break them open, and they had sort of this sweet gelatinous substance in there that pigs would often eat. They'd use to feed the pigs, that the very poor of society would eat. And here he is, and he has these pods, and he's feeding them to the pigs, and the owner is sitting there, don't eat those. Those are for my pigs. And this young man here is starving, feeding these pigs, these detestable creatures. He's hit the very bottom. There's nowhere to go from here. He can't get any lower. Verse 17. But when he came to his senses, that literal idea is when he stopped being insane, when he became uncrazy, when he started thinking logically again, meaning that everything prior to this has been illogical, foolish, and an act of insanity. When he starts thinking clearly or sanely, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread? But I am dying here with hunger." And he starts having this inner conversation with himself. He's sitting here, breaking these things open, drooling, hunger, his stomach turning with ache at the lack of food that he has as he feeds what he so desperately wants, these pigs. And all of a sudden, this realization comes to him and hits him. I have been such a fool. I had everything, and I gave it up for this. My father, the servants, those who are the lowest of the low in my father's household, have bread. I'm not even allowed to eat these pods. And he thinks within himself, verse 18, I will get up and go to my father and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. Notice, again, Jesus is narrowing down this picture more to show the repentant sinner and God's love for that sinner's heart. The sheep doesn't repent of what he's done. He doesn't, I'm sorry, shepherd, I ran away. The coin doesn't repent to the owner saying, I'm sorry, I got myself lost, or I'm sorry you lost me, or whatever. The son repents. He sees his folly. He realizes, I have sinned against heaven and against my Father. I'm not worthy of anything to be called your son. I just would be happy to be one of the people doing your pigs, Father, where I can at least have bread from you. Verse 20, so he got up and came to his father. And this is very interesting. You have verse 13. He takes the money from his father. You see him take a few days to leave. Here in verse 20, he's like sitting here feeding the pigs, and all of a sudden, he thinks this through. He gets the speech rehearsed for what he's going to say to his father. Gets up, starts walking home. There's no, well, I think I better wait about this, or let's think about this a little bit more, or let's sleep on it, or he just gets up and goes. But while he is still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. What a beautiful picture we have here. You see the son. He's coming from a distant land, this long journey, clothes and rags, and here he is walking and walking and walking. And he looks up, and there in the distance you can see his father's fields and the farm and the house. He looks up, and there's this figure there, hunched over, doing something, working on something, and it looks up, and it's his dad. And his dad looks up, and he sees his son way, way, way down there. And there's this brief pause of them just reconnecting and seeing one another. And then his father takes off running. He runs at him, runs for him. It says he ran and embraced him and kissed him because he felt compassion for him. And this act of running, this was very unhonorable. His father takes and he raises up his long robe, and he raises it up, and he's running with his naked legs, running toward his son. Something that would not have been done. He doesn't care. He loves his son. He feels compassion for him. And he runs and he grabs him and he's kissing him. And you can just see the tears rolling down his face and his son. And they're crying and weeping together. And his son, as they're sitting here saying this, the son, through his tears and as he's sitting here crying, says to his father, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." And notice, he doesn't even get to finish his speech. He's sitting here bawling and crying. If you look back at verse 19, or verse 18 and 19, he says, here's his rehearsed speech. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men." He doesn't even get to get through the whole speech. His father interrupts him, said to his slaves, the people that his son was planning on being, "Father, just make me a slave." He goes and he says to the slaves, "Quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him. Give him my very best. Put it on him. And put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet." The father welcomes him back into the family with the robe. With the ring and sandals, he shows that he is in a place of honor. He is not a servant. The servants and slaves went around with bare feet and didn't have jewelry and things they wore. They were there to work and work hard. His father says, "No," in these actions, "No, you are my son. You are still a part of my family. I love you. I care for you." And he goes on, 23, "And bring the fattened calf, kill it, and let us celebrate and eat. For the son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found." And they began to celebrate. The father here, he goes further. It wasn't just he was lost and he was found. He's saying, this one was dead. He considered me as dead to himself. He left completely separated. And he's been made alive again. He was lost and he's been found. Let's celebrate the rejoicing heart of God for the repentant sinner. Now, this parable, in order to be like the first two, should stop right here. The first two are the same thing. The thing is lost, it's found, rejoicing, bringing others in, and the whole group rejoicing. But it doesn't. Jesus here is wanting to show the Pharisees their lack of God's heart as well. You've got the prodigal son's brother. Verse 25. "Now his older son was in the field." He's working hard, like he always is, every day. "When he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing." And that word, music and dancing, his father had hired out this band, and they're sitting there in this house, and they're having one big party. People are dancing around, celebrating. There's music playing. People are jumping up and down, and his older son comes, and he's like, "What's going on here?" So he grabs one of the servants. "What's going on?" Inquired him about these things, what they could be. Verse 27, he said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound." The father is so happy to have the son back safe and sound. And the servant recognizes, your father is glad for this. He's brought your youngest brother back. And look at the response. So counter the servant to the other people in the house, to the father, but he became angry and was not willing to go in. Everyone else here is rejoicing and happy and pleased that the brother has safely made it home. The lost has been found. The one who was dead has been made alive. He's angry. He's unwilling to go in. I cannot even stand to look at him. I don't want to see this feasting and this festivities and this celebrating. I don't want anything to do with this. His father came out and began pleading with him. But he answered and said to his father,